help women, save lives, and peacefully end abortion where you live.
I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired.
You were serious about that?
Be inspired to change hearts and minds by joining over 1 million volunteers taking part in the global movement happening in your neighborhood.
She says, pray that I can get through this abortion. And I said, oh, no. So she went ahead and went into the abortion clinic. And she just came out. She told us, I'm not going to get the abortion. We just had a baby saved. We had a baby saved in Memphis today. Praise the Lord.
This is the 40 Days for Life podcast with your host, Sean Carney.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the 40 Days for Life podcast. I'm Sean Carney, the president of 40 Days for Life, and your host for this podcast, which is dedicated to helping you end abortion where you live. And we have a very important topic and a recent topic in this August heat-filled podcast episode of the 40 Days for Life podcast, and that is the Babylon Bee released a story. Oh, never mind. It was the Washington Post. I only thought it was the Babylon Bee because of what's in this tragic, comical, goofy, and sad story in the Washington Post. And we will break it down for you. Perhaps you have heard about it. Perhaps you haven't. But there are many things about it that show that we are in high tide in a post-Roe America, and that the idea of defending abortion, talking about abortion, supporting abortion is getting weirder. It's getting more awkward. And I think it's reaching an all-time high of inefficiency. And we will discuss that today on the podcast with someone who is always efficient, and that is Mr. Steve Carlin in Madison, Wisconsin. Steve, I know you're ready for fall. It's already mid-August, so you're frozen.
Hey, don't rush us too deep into August here. We still have another week, I think, before we hit mid-August. But I will say, Sean, I've been getting reports from you and from Ramona Trevino and from Heather Gardner, from all the Texans on the team about how hot it's been all summer in Texas. I can tell you, Laura and I go out. We oftentimes in the evening take prayer walks at night, like 9 o'clock or so. And I think I can count on both hands, maybe even one hand, the number of nights we have not needed to take a life jacket out with us as we stroll the neighborhood.
Okay, if you do a prayer walk right now in Texas in the evening, which sounds very wonderful for you and Laura to do, if we were to do it, we're praying because it means that we're dying.
Yeah.
And we're asking God for his mercy as we get ready to face his just judgment. So that would be the motivation for our prayer walk. It's very odd. So 2 years ago in Houston, we didn't hit 100 degrees all summer. We didn't hit 90 till the 4th of July, unheard of. So
Wow.
That's like a cold summer. Then last year we had a record, not like all time, but top 5, just hottest summers, but we got a ton of rain. This summer, we're having a record summer with no rain. And that's really odd because of the Gulf of Mexico. Houston just always a place in Texas where we get tons of rain, which is great, but that's the humidity. Rains a lot, then it's roasting and all that. But we have just been buried in the upper 90s and lower 100s with no rain. Everything's dead. Everything's dead. I'm looking at my yard right now. But our spirits, Steve, are very much alive. And this is the time when other people should say, you know what? I know Texas is better than every other place in America to live. I know it's great. I know it's pro-life. I know your food is superior. I know that the Cowboys are actually America's team. I know all those things, and I want to live there. But now that it's August, I will point out what's bad about living in Texas. This is the time to have those conversations, Steve. And it's the time for me to wish I was in Wisconsin with you, being a third wheel to your prayer walk, because it's just been a beatdown. It's 93 by like 9:30 in the morning.
Yeah, that's rough. If any consolation, you may not be able to enjoy the great outdoors. I have been, but it's been limited, Sean, because of something I'm going to tell you about in just a moment. But back during the COVID era, we all had too much time on our hands. I know I'm bringing up COVID. It's not about COVID. It's just what happened.
You are obsessed with COVID. I can't ask you where you eat lunch without you talking about COVID. But keep going.
Like everything, the lockdowns and everything kind of ended. And so I put up this American flag on my deck and declared it Club Freedom. And somehow that name just stuck.
Yes.
And so my friends and whatever, my family don't come over and like have a barbecue on the deck. They come to Club Freedom. And we've been trying to enjoy Club Freedom, but a doggone skunk has made its home somewhere on the Carlin property, and we keep seeing it out there. So we have been limited too, in a very different way, in our ability to enjoy the great outdoors this summer.
I actually have some advice for you and the listeners for skunks. So I
need it because I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, it's fun, but it's different. So it's controversial. But my in-laws, when they lived out in the country in East Texas, Mary Lisa and I were newly married, and they had a huge skunk problem. Okay. And they're in the attic, they're in the basement, and it's kind of, once they get in there, it's hard to get rid of them. Same with possums. So do y'all have possums up there? Is it too cold?
The same night that we saw the skunk the first time, we saw a possum wander through.
Okay. So they're like in sweatshirts and stuff. Okay. So here was the system that my brilliant father-in-law, who you know and love, came up with. And of course, he was at the time an OBGYN. And so he's always getting up at 2 or 3 in the morning or whatever to go deliver a baby. So you can get traps. Okay. It's a skunk trap. And there's an alarm on the trap. And here was the system. You set up the traps, and they obviously come out only at night. They go in. The alarm wakes you up like an alarm clock. It's loud. And my brother-in-laws, who were then like in high school, would come down to the trap with their 12 gauges and shoot the skunk. Ooh. And that's how they eliminated all of them. So you lose a little sleep, gives you a good reason to use a shotgun. Of course, they were out in the country. I don't want you you'd probably be arrested in Madison just for owning
my little
a gun.
1/4-acre yard.
Boom. We got him. Like 8 neighbors come out. They're like, Carlin's lost it. I always knew he was a violent pro-lifer. So that was the system, and it worked. But I remember one time my father-in-law was like running out to go deliver a baby, and the alarm went off. So like he went and woke up one of his sons because he had to like go deliver a baby. He delivered the baby, and right after the delivery, he like ran to the phone in the hospital and called to see if they had killed the skunks. So somebody's like, best day of their life when their child came into the world. My father-in-law delivered that baby and then ran out of the room so that he could check on his skunk issue. But it is a problem.
They don't spray when they get the 12 gauge treatment. They don't spray, because to me, the only thing worse than not finding the skunk in the trap is encountering the skunk in the trap.
Yes. So you have to either have the trap in a place where you feel comfortable shooting, which is hard because it's obviously in your house a lot of times. There's places like, if you find out where they're getting in the house, that's the best, because it's probably your garden. There's like an opening, so when they come in to smuggle their way into the house, they're in the trap, and you may lose a couple of whatever you plant up there. Flowers. I don't know anything about gardening, but you may blow some of those away. But you just open the trap door and shoot it.
We've got a brisket tree up here. That's what we were growing in the garden this year.
I'd have to ask. I'm pretty sure one of my brother-in-laws did get sprayed, but they really don't know what's going on. They kind of see you, and if you can manage it in a way they don't feel threatened, it's not like they're looking at your gun saying, "Oh, that's a Winchester. I'm in trouble." So you just have to kind of manage that. But it worked, and they were in the middle of nowhere. I'm really surprised you're having an issue, but it's annoying.
Well, to bring it full circle on the COVID talk, I'll wear my mask when I go out and get the skunk, and that will keep me safe and secure.
And you will disarm the skunk. He won't spray you because he'll think, this guy's looking out for me. He doesn't want to spread COVID to me, and so I won't spray him. So you may get like a pro Fauci skunk who sees you as very, very polite because you're wearing the mask. Of course, if they see the gun, they may think otherwise, but they don't know what that is. So I'm sorry to hear that. It's you know what, Steve? That's a good transition. It is hard raising children. And there's a lot of suffering. And all of a sudden, when you're cursed with taking care of other human beings, a dang skunk shows up and just makes the burden even worse in a post-Roe America. So I think it's a good transition to our topic today, which is very telling on the big picture and very weird on the small picture. So I will summarize and then we'll get into this. So the Washington Post did a story. Oh my God, just tugs at the heart. And there was a couple in the evil patriarchy location of Texas, which is in America still. And they were forced to give birth. We wrote a book called What Did Say When? We talk about forced birth. It's a thing. So they were forced to give birth. And our response was, well, what is it then? Like forced making peanut butter sandwiches, forced cleaning up the kitchen, forced dirty bathrooms, forced crying babies, all that. And everybody said, that's absurd. And that is exactly what the Washington Post is writing about. The fact that these people have been forced to raise two adorable girls, by the way. They've been forced to raise these little girls. Their life is hell. And the article is all over the map emotionally. On one hand, these people say this is the biggest blessing. We love our girls. We couldn't live without them. And on another paragraph, they're saying we just, we're not so sure. And these are the most dysfunctional, immature people I think I've ever read about in mainstream media. And basically, Steve, the article, which is all over the place, highlights what we all know, which is parenting is hard. It can be really hard. It can be really rewarding. But they're your kids. Get over it.
It's a pretty wild thing. It's obviously this article is designed to try to justify the continuing hand-wringing about Roe being overturned. We've been talking about for some time that as like the abortion supporters and their friends in the media want us to apologize. Like, well, what are these women going to do? And now here a year plus after Roe was overturned, they're coming back and look at how these people are struggling to raise their children. Well, yeah, it's a struggle in a sense for sure, but anything worth doing is a struggle. And certainly the struggle, I think, is a preferable struggle to the struggle that these women and men who go through with their abortions have when they regret it for years and decades, and the pain that comes with it. And the women who we've talked with who can't vacuum their own house because the sound of a vacuum cleaner reminds them of their abortion, and they don't want to hold their niece or nephew as babies because they don't want to be around babies because it reminds them of the trauma of abortion. We're talking about basic stuff that is pretty universal to the human experience. Making some meals, cleaning, washing their hair, brushing their teeth. And of course, all of the joys that come with it far outweigh, even admittedly in this article, as you mentioned, it's all over the board. It comes through that the joys of raising children far surpass the hardships that come with raising children. So it is a mixed bag to be sure, but I think there's no denying that this Washington Post author really desired to try to come after states like Texas for protecting unborn children because, God forbid, it's difficult along the way.
And I want to make a point before we get into this. We are not glossing over the great sacrifices that children take. In fact, we both have a lot of kids. So I think we would know that more than the average person. And Steve, we had kids young when you don't know what you're doing and you're broke and you're moving from apartments and, all that kind of stuff. We have done and are doing that. It is very, very difficult. But what's different, and everybody knows that, and it's common sense, and you do it. You do it. And of course, the good far outweighs the bad. And you love your children. You would do anything for them. But this whole notion that you regret your kid's existence, number one is, I think, a big baby boomer thing. And we know the baby boomers like when we rip on them, and we do it a lot. But this sort of selfish, you ruined my life. I could have done blank. I could have been blank if I didn't have kids. It's totally opposite of human nature. Certainly the opposite of Luke 1, be it done unto me according to thy word. But we know the great sacrifice. You do sacrifice. Your life changes. That's why we've said on the podcast, anybody who says have kids when you're ready is an idiot. No one in the history of the world, whether they have 5 kids or 1 kid, has ever been ready to have a kid. Ever. So somebody who says you need to wait to have kids because you'll be ready, or are you ready to have kids? No, not ready. I haven't been ready. Won't be ready. Maybe you can be prepared, but that's a stupid word. You can't be prepared, but you can say, we're going to live here. I will work here. And, we will get our groceries here. And, that's about it. But the whole notion that you're ready to have a kid, that's why this article, Steve, it's never written 5 years ago. It's never written pre-Roe. Certainly is never written in the 70s or 80s or 90s or up to now. But this is basically taking this subtle baby boomer, kids are a burden, kids are expensive, the passive aggressive thing of like kids equal restraint on my freedom. This is that to the max. This is just like the 4th of July firework party of what about me? And there's nothing there. You keep waiting for one of the parents in this article to be sick. You keep waiting for cancer to make an appearance. You keep waiting for some kind of just big, wow, they really got it tough. And there's just nothing there. She doesn't want to clean up the sandwich after lunch, and the kids scream, and they do. But then it's just this wishy-washy, oh my gosh, they're so adorable. We couldn't live without them. And it's like, then why are you being interviewed by the Washington Post? Why are you being used as a pawn for this idiotic publication, which is just basically, and, skipping to the end, which I know we shouldn't do, Steve. I don't know what we're supposed to think. I don't know what the Washington Post wants. Or should Texas not have passed those laws? By the way, Texas saved these 2 babies. But before I get a hold of myself or get ahead of myself, just give us the summary, Steve.
So Brooke Alexander and Billy High had sort of a teenage romance over summer. They were dating for a few months, and by the end of summer, Brooke takes a pregnancy test. It comes back positive. And so this is not welcomed.
Texans.
Yeah, they're in Texas. This is not welcome news at this point in life. So they're thinking, okay, well, we'll get an abortion, right? We'll use our freedom to choose, and we'll get an abortion, and problem solved, right? Except for right as they're taking this pregnancy test, the Texas Heartbeat Act takes effect. So suddenly abortion is prohibited after 6 weeks of pregnancy. Brooke has no idea how far along she is. So she rushes to go get an ultrasound to find out if there's still time to get an abortion or not. And she didn't realize it, but she went to a pro-life pregnancy help center, and they did the ultrasound. They dated her not at the 6-week cutoff, not at 7 weeks where it's just over, but she was at 12. She was at the end of that first trimester. And that ultrasound also revealed that she was carrying twin girls. And so as happens, as we report on happening at 40 Days for Life vigil sites all over the place, Brooke sees those beating hearts. Her mom, who favored an abortion, automatically says, we're keeping these babies. These are our babies. We're taking them home. It's suddenly, one baby, which is a problem, turns into 2 babies, which is tremendous news. Great, beautiful, praise God. And Brooke herself, too, sees that beating heart. And she realizes, like, I'm going to choose life here. So this is the great crime here. This is the great travesty. This is the great oppression of women, that she has the opportunity, thanks to this Texas law, to meet her baby face to face via the sonogram, to see those 2 hearts pounding away, and she chooses life, and she has her babies, and parenting is hard. And now the Washington Post has this article, which really is framing parenthood, I think, in many of the worst, most difficult, most challenging moments, sort of defining parenthood by those difficult moments, to try to say, like, yeah, the headline of the article was, an abortion ban made them teen parents. Like, it just sounds scary. I think we break out our dun, dun, dun sound.
Dun, dun, dun.
I don't know. It's a shame that Texas law forced them to engage in the behavior that makes children until conception happened. Wait, no. It was conception that made them parents, not a Texas abortion ban.
People get mad at these analogies, but let's back up on what we're talking about. If these beautiful twins, which I don't want to say to Washington Post's credit, but I guess to their credit, they show the twins, they humanize them, they're playing, they're super cute. There's all those photos in the article. The article is long, and it didn't really even need to exist because it has no real objective conclusion. But if those girls don't exist, it means that they were dismembered and sucked out of their mother's womb in a vacuum and put into a canister and hauled away by a medical waste truck. That's what abortion does. It is awfully successful in doing that. That's the alternative. That's the alternative. So, you know, people that are bigoted against Jewish people, and they complain about Jewish people because for whatever reason they don't like them. This is like them saying, yeah, I mean, if it hadn't have been for the Brits and the Americans, you know, we wouldn't have this problem these days because the Jews would have been killed. When the alternative is death compared to your current life, when the alternative is death compared to your current life, life always wins, you know? To hell with the ambulance for being so close to Grandpa when he was having a massive heart attack. He'd be dead right now, you know? But no, now we got to drive him to the doctor and we got to buy him a Christmas present. And this whole notion that you can alleviate suffering on earth, which is what the scariest people throughout history promise, it leads to this mentality that good things are a burden that should be annihilated through death. Let's go through some of these quotes. In the opening paragraph, Brooke High was not ready to face her family. Sitting on the edge of her bed, hair dripping wet, the 19-year-old listened to her twin daughters cry in their high chairs on the other side of the door. One hurled what sounded like a plate, then a bottle. Steve, you know how you put kids in high chairs and you hand them like the plate of like SpaghettiOs or whatever? The plate goes first, and then what do they throw?
The SpaghettiOs, whatever's left, whatever's within reach, the fork, you name it.
And then the bottle, Steve. I mean, they act like the baby girl was like a raging drunk, and she was, you know, throwing glass bottles of Jack Daniels at her mother, saying she was going to kill her. She wasn't. She's like one. Like they have a like she's cute, she's little. Kids throw the bottle. And I'm not cracking on the mom for not knowing that. I'm not saying those situations aren't stressful, but this is how a pro Roe v. Wade article opens in the Washington Post. This isn't some lunatic far left, you know, crazy blog that no one's ever heard of. They are setting the stage that because the kid's acting like a kid, we need to have abortion in Texas. That's why we're coming so down. I'm not picking on the mom and saying you shouldn't be frustrated. I get all that. I'm picking on her because she allowed herself to be used as a pawn and just makes herself look immature and selfish, the whole article. But they're going to regret this. I mean, these beautiful girls are going to grow up and read this garbage on the internet and realize it was their parents. Okay, here's another little the headline photo, the caption. Brooke is in bed looking at her phone while dad struggles with the two 2-year-olds having a temper tantrum. Okay.
Yeah, this is where, you know, even though the article at some points, as you've mentioned, will share some of the beauties of parenting, like they clearly are leading off with, you know, that paragraph you just mentioned, this photo, they're making it look like parenting is a complete disaster. They're framing it in the worst possible light possible. And I think it's a disgrace. Like those moments happen, and it's not that the people who, you know, it almost makes it sound as though these babies in particular deserve to be aborted because look how bad they're behaving.
It's awkward. It's kind of like nobody's reading this going, gosh, my kid's never done that. But if they had, I'd definitely want to kill them. Nobody's saying that. Everybody's like, oh yeah, that happens. I mean, they're not complaining about,
if we didn't live in Texas, I'll tell you what.
Boy, I wish I was a New Yorker. You'd be dead. Trust me. It's just weird. And there's nothing like kind of blowing off the page of you're just like, oh my gosh, these people. And by the way, we're going to get to how we do have those stories when the parents choose life, and it's these heroic moms that think this is absurd. They're not celebrating them. They're not celebrating Rowan, who was raped and was pressured to have an abortion and chose life and walked across the stage with a little girl at top of her class in college after that horrific experience. They're not doing an article on her post-Roe. They're doing an article on these goofballs. Okay. Yeah, it is inhumane towards the twins. It's very, very strange. A little bit of compassion for these people, because Grandpa is a ding-dong at best. So the 2022 article, it recounts Brooks texting her dad that she was going to find out.
Sean, just to back up here, this is a second article. So the article that we're talking about was sort of part two in a series. You're referring to part one, which came out right just days before the Roe decision, before Roe was overturned and the Dobbs decision.
Correct. Different article. Same people. The 2022 article recounted Brooke texting her dad that she was going to find out whether she was past 6 weeks of pregnancy to see, quote, if abortion is an option. She's texting her dad. Her dad replies, fingers crossed.
We've talked on this podcast numerous times before about like the things, the rude, the inappropriate, the uncomfortable and awkward things that make for an awkward Thanksgiving. This is a lifetime of awkward Thanksgivings once these kids get old enough and find this article archived. The internet is always open and it never forgets. There's no destroying this or putting it down the memory hole.
You're still within the weeks that you can get an abortion. God has answered our prayers. Fingers were crossed. I don't know if the twins are getting good Christmas presents from Grandpa. And then her mom. This is where we feel bad for her. Brooke's mom suggested the abortion, noting that she had had her first child at age 20 and believes she might have been a prosecutor instead of a retail worker. Except she couldn't do that, Steve, because she had a baby.
Yeah, and I don't know if you could pick this out, Sean. I read those paragraphs a handful of times to try to figure out, was that baby Brooke? Was that baby the twins' mom? It was unclear to me, but either way, it sort of suggests a little bit of self-loathing, maybe some survivor's guilt. Like you go through life thinking like, gosh, my mom thinks life would have been better without me. I guess maybe this article is just paying it forward another generation.
It is. This is selfish people raising selfish people. And my point is that we've always had that, right? But that we're at this level in this absurd response post-Roe where people are like, abortion is the answer. I'm a victim. If I was able to go and have my children killed, I wouldn't have to pick up the bottle that the baby threw on the ground. I just wouldn't have to do it because they'd be dead. They couldn't hold a bottle. They're dead. And that this is somehow mainstream news. Like we're supposed to be wide-eyed. Like your daughter became a retailer and not a prosecutor. You weren't able to be a prosecutor. You had to get a job. It's all this stuff. By the way, totally degrading to the women who are prosecutors who like, yeah, I got pregnant in college or law school and it was really difficult and I made it. I mean, they're just like thrown out. But one of the things that's required in this, Steve, is these two articles, like two parts. It's brutal. We're doing this so you don't have to read them. They not only dehumanize these beautiful twins who they awkwardly keep showing and referencing in the article. And you're kind of figuring out, do these people like their twins? And then they confirm they do. In fact, they love them. And they said they couldn't live without them. This is why Ted Cruz called this a pro-life article. I don't know if I go that far because it's just odd. It's an odd pro-abortion article and phrase it as that. But it not only dehumanizes the little twins, it dehumanizes these parents, Steve.
Yeah, they really come off as immature and selfish. Billy, the father, he's constantly on his phone. He's constantly playing video games. He didn't really want to have the babies because he wanted to skateboard and to, quote, chill. And
you can't. By the way, just because Steve, are you a skateboarder, by the way?
Sean, you've seen enough of me like at the symposium trying to dance. There's no chance in the world I have enough coordination to stand on a skateboard, even if it's not moving.
The only reason I say that is that a stereotype, my thought process, because you were in a garage band. And when I think of garage band, I'm like, there's probably a skateboard somewhere in there. I don't know if he's golfing on his time. I was probably skateboarding. So, okay, you were not a skateboarder, but you do like to chill. But
who doesn't?
So I want to tell the audience, you're not ad-libbing that. Like, oh, he just wants to chill. He's a lazy dad. That's a quote from this Washington Post article. How did the reporter just not go, okay, I came in for an agenda. I wanted to show how abortion, not having access to reproductive rights, is ruining, some people's lives, and I want to lay that out. And when the boyfriend, or Billy and Brooke, I'm not sure if those are the real names, but whatever. If Billy's like, man, I just wanted to play video games and chill, isn't the reporter at that point going, we're kind of losing some substance here. We're losing our depth in the realm of your suffering?
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it's by design. I'm going to explain why I think that in a moment, because first, the article isn't all that much kinder to Brooke either. She's portrayed as kind of neurotic, kind of jealous. She's a high school dropout. Yeah. She grew up in a broken home. She copes with the stresses of raising children by binge watching television. And I'm not saying this to pick on her at all. This is just straight from the article. And I think it's by design, because I think what this article does is it allows the reader to sort of subconsciously, come to the conclusion of these people are poor, white trash, and it's a good thing that they are not bringing another generation of poor white trash into the world. And that's subconscious, because what they're really able to think, what they say is, we want to help these young parents. They would have a brighter future. They'd be able to pursue their dreams, claw their way out of a cycle of, poverty and broken homes, if only they had access to abortion on demand. So it's sort of like you allow yourself to sort of claim that the support for abortion is out of compassion that they have a better life. And really, at the subconscious level, it's I don't want any more of these poor people gumming up our society. It's a mess, and it would be just best if they didn't have any more kids.
You're exactly right. This is the core of the abortion debate, and the Washington Post is embracing their identity of left, white, eugenics loving liberals. That's the whole thing. That's why they're putting some of this out there. Is can you believe they don't want their kids? What a freaking disgrace. This is why we need abortion. These poor white trash people, a bunch of rednecks who live in trailers, need abortion. And it's kind of the opposite version of when I did that NBC interview 4 or 5 years ago with the Alabama abortion ban when they first tried it. And they interviewed one of the abortion facility owners, and it was this old white lady, and she had the raspy voice, and she was like, I don't know where these black women are gonna go to get their abortions, She just might as well had the Marlboro flipping around in her mouth with the cold gas station coffee. It was just brutal that she was also using for an ashtray. I mean, I'm just sitting there going, let her talk more, please. But it all boils down to that.
Time.
The poor white trash, the poor black babies. I mean, it all the disabled ones too. They're even worse. It's all eugenics. It's all you shouldn't exist, according to who? Us. Well, why do you know better? Because we're smarter than you, and you're uneducated, and you sound like an idiot in this article. So we're going to highlight it to prove to the world.
It shows that the foundation of abortion is despair. There's never any suggestion that these folks can parent their children and climb their way to a brighter future with the help of God, with the help of hard work, with the help of the pro-lifers in the community who provided them with that initial ultrasound that empowered them to choose life. There's no hint of any of that. It's just, you are who you are. There's no hope of escaping it. And we'll just try to, numb you to the realities of existence so that the pain isn't too sharp and you don't have to pick up the bottle that got thrown across the room by the 2-year-old.
I think what fixes a lot of this is the headline. I think that they're so out with their agenda because they can't help themselves that the headline should be, banning abortion is not always a curse. banning abortion may not be a curse, if they want to go middle of the road, but just draw them in. But the whole like forced parenting thing, and then these people go through and they talk about how hard it was. They didn't want the baby. They're terrified. The kids are screaming. And then they sort of turn it around and the kids are fun. And we just don't know what we do without our girls. And we love playing on the floor and all the things that both parents say. You just don't know what the Washington Post point is. Parenting can be hard and it's very rewarding. There's croissants in the back. Should we kill them if it's hard? No. That's really bad. That's murder, in fact. So they're just not telling us anything we don't know. The only thing that could salvage an article like this is if they changed the blatantly pro-abortion headline and just questioned it. Has Dobbs been bad for everyone? ? And that would actually draw in their own liberal readers. But this is just babbling on and on about obvious things. It's all over the map.
I think one of my favorite lines from it describes Billy, Brooke, and their twins as, quote, a family compelled into existence by an abortion ban. Oh, not another family.
It's not funny. I did a interview on earlier today when we recorded this podcast on this. So I guess I've gotten all the serious stuff out of my system, but like, you're forced together because you weren't killed? I mean, then you take any scenario on Earth. We're all on a plane together. Why? Because some of y'all weren't aborted. And now the middle seat's taken. I can't put my backpack there because your mom chose life. If you were aborted, my backpack would be fine. I'd be a lot more comfortable on this 3-hour flight. I mean, we're talking about life. There is no scenario where, I guess it's the opposite. In every scenario, they'll just argue the pain or the suffering or the discomfort in this situation could have been solved by killing a couple of folks before they were too, conscious to know what was happening to them. That's the whole solution. It's absolute despair, as you said. And one of the great things about this article is this is not good for the abortion industry. This is weird. This is weird because Planned Parenthood has lived in a realm where you have access to reproductive health or you'll die. You'll have access to reproductive health or you're persecuted. You'll have access to reproductive health and that will enable you to fulfill your dreams. What Planned Parenthood doesn't get into historically is, hey, let's check on the mom that chose life and see how miserable she is. And do you know why, Steve? Because when they do that, they've got to check in on the baby boy or the baby girl. And that personalizes it. And Planned Parenthood does not want to personalize any kind of baby or infant or child. So they avoid these follow-up stories. I bet you Planned Parenthood was ticked. Certainly abortionists were ticked when they saw it because they're like, we don't want to check in on the people that either chose life or were forced to have a baby unless the mom died during birth. That's the only scenario. And of course, that doesn't happen. But that's the only scenario that they want to check in on a woman who is forced to have a baby or chooses life.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And as I was reading this article and just the way it condescendingly looks down upon Billy and Brooke, I couldn't help but to think of an article. I don't know where I read it, when I read it, where it was from. But there was this beautiful article about a pro-life pregnancy help center that helped empower this woman to choose life. And this woman similarly did not come across as someone who had made great life decisions. I think it was like her 6th baby with the 5th father, and she's morbidly obese. And they're quoting this poor woman and how this woman is describing how the pregnancy help center representative visited her home to help bring her some supplies and give her some counseling and things like that. And the woman talks about how she's kind of like lumbering up the stairs to her apartment. She's morbidly obese, and she looks up at the pregnancy help center counselor, expecting to see judgment in her eyes, condemnation, you know what causes all your problems is you. And instead, she just saw compassion in the pregnancy help worker's eyes. There's no compassion in the eyes of the author who wrote this article in the Washington Post. It is pure condescending. It is there's nothing charitable or kind-hearted about it whatsoever.
Well, if there was the only line, and I'm surprised the Washington Post included this from Brooke, because they do beat up on her. And I would encourage people to read the article, because I think it's encouraging for the pro-life cause, because this is just, if you support abortion, you're uncomfortable reading this, because you're like, look, they wanted to have the baby, and they didn't want kids. I guess they were forced because Texas is, whatever, super religious and pro-life. But the result of that is they have twins they love and say they can't live without. Why are we using this to justify abortion? Like, what happened to exploiting rape victims, which has been their really go-to. Okay, so here's what Brooke said. Or here's part of the article based on what Brooke said. Brooke, too, chose life because of the pregnancy center. Quote, if she really tried, Brooke thought that she could make it to New Mexico for the abortion, but she couldn't stop staring at the pulsing yellow line on the ultrasound screen. She wondered if her babies had heartbeats, was aborting them murder. I'm shocked they let that in, Steve. And that's why Ted Cruz said it's a pro-life article.
Though they couldn't help but to put the word heartbeats in quotation marks, those scare quotes, like, well, heartbeats. That's outrageous. I mean, we've talked about that.
Yeah, Steve, right now, you're breathing on the podcast. Steve, let me guess. Your heart's beating right now, ain't it, buddy? Don't you seem alive?
You say so.
I love it when they put the heartbeats in quotes. But if it's not a real heartbeat, they'd be dead. So, oh my word!
And again, we're not talking like early on before you can detect the heartbeat, and I don't think there's any controversy. But there's no controversy at 12 weeks. Come on.
That's why I look on this. When we recorded this, there's many more now, but when we recorded this a few days before it came out, there were 6,000 comments on this article. Okay. And so I didn't want to click on it, because then you just get sucked in and all that. But that really, we need to have somebody on our team do it. The comments, because it's the Washington Post, it may not just be pro-lifers going and saying, you people make me sick, or whatever pro-lifers would say. But that, I'm interested in that. I'm interested in the person that starts off saying, I support a woman's right to choose, but. Those are always the most helpful, right? In these comments, it's easy to say, oh, yeah, they're supporting us or they're supporting them. But the people that they're trying to address the article to, which is pro-abortion supporters, and they're just sitting there going, I don't know. I don't know about this. And those are the comments I'd be interested in. We'd have to look. But there were a lot of comments. This is an awkward, weird article picking on two parents who are somehow supposed to be victims at the same time, who now don't really see themselves as victims because they love their children. It's the most bizarre piece of journalism I've seen in a while. And Steve, you're a journalist before this, and there's just like an agenda: open the borders, or build the wall, or why do we have to pay for interstates? I never use them. Everything should be a tollway, or healthcare for all. Whatever it is, there's just like a position. This is weird. This is why we have harped on this. People do not know how to articulate abortion who support abortion.
I think the agenda on this one, I can't prove it. I think the agenda on this one is to try to win an award. I obviously I have not seen many movies. We talk about that a lot.
But worst.
There's the random movie comes out and it's kind of brilliant. It's kind of long. We don't really know who wanted this movie to be made. Clearly the director was just going for an Oscar. That's kind of what this article says to me. Nobody asks for a 5,000 word article on this topic. I'm glad they wrote it. I think it's despicable and shameful, but I'm glad they wrote it because I think it reveals a lot of things that ordinarily live in the margins and the shadows and don't get talked about. But I don't know. To me, this article, whether they're trying to push an abortion narrative, which they clearly are, or win an award, which is speculation on my part, the only thing that I came away with knowing for sure after reading this article is, one, pro-life pregnancy help centers save lives, and 2, pro-life laws save lives.
By the way, you have explained a lot to me. This is one of the most genius things you've ever said on the podcast, and I didn't know you were going to say it, but that makes sense. It's like, oh, the reporter just wanted an award. And so, because there's the whole thing, whoever the reporter is, I don't know. Sally had the courage to look at both sides and to go into the weeds. What happens to these people after they're forced to have these like screaming little kids that are so annoying? Let's take a look at it and share it with the world. It's kind of like this courageous thing. And you're just looking for an award. It's a really good point, because you can watch some of those movies like critically acclaimed, and they're usually terrible. But you watch them and you go, I don't understand the point of that. Juno was kind of like that, in all fairness, and that's a movie we like. Juno's a very pro-life movie, and it's the director, right, who's very pro-abortion. And I forget their name, Steve, but we've talked
Diablo Cody.
That's it, which sounds like a cool restaurant. Or cafe. Yeah. I got you on that one.
I like it.
Yeah, it worked. But that person made a pro-life movie and didn't intend to, and like regretted it, because Juno is very, very pro-life, but it's quirky, it's different, it takes a different angle. And I think that was the same scenario. They went in there and said, I'm going to look at abortion and make a quirky movie and have the little protester, but she's going to choose life. And, it's kind of this weird dynamic, and won a bunch of awards. And then the pro-lifers were like, great job. And the director was just kind of mad. That could happen here. I'm still a little surprised that the Washington Post published it. They probably just had so much invested in it. It is long. I think the reporter lived with these people for 6 months. You know what happened? The reporter left, and these people started complaining about her.
Yeah.
And then she wanted coffee. And then I gave her a cup of coffee, and she asked for a dang sweet and low. Selfish Washington Post. It's just, well, that's part of having guests. Sometimes they want coffee. Sometimes they want sugar in it. Sometimes they want cream in it. Life's hard. If the reporter were dead, you wouldn't have to serve her coffee. It'd be great. So it is.
It calls the question, though. Like, she gets to the tension of the matter. Here's a great quote. Looking at her daughters, Brooke struggled to articulate her feelings on abortion. On one hand, she said she absolutely believed that women have the right to choose what's best for their own lives. On the other hand, she knew that without the Texas law, her babies might not be here. Who's to say what I would have done if that law wasn't in effect, she said. I don't want to think about it. It's really scary thinking that I wouldn't have them.
That's it. And that's the part that surprises me, that they allowed the article in. And what I'm glad about that is when I first read it is, okay, they're showing that Brooke is not this totally like self-serving, clueless, watching Judge Judy all day, which is what they talk about half the time, mom. And that, human nature kicks in, and it's scary to think about that I would have aborted them. I'm happy that they included that. I think that's why this is supposed to be a hit piece in some ways, but that's why a lot of people, I mentioned Ted Cruz, they came out and said, because they were like, your state did this, answer for it, evil person. And he's like, that was a pro-life article, or no, it was a pro-life article, but he thought it was pro-life, and it is in many, many ways. So,
they asked the husband the same question, the father of the children. They ask him the same question, and he doesn't have anything remarkable to say. He just kind of repeatedly shrugs his shoulders and says, I'd really prefer not to think about it, which I think is society's reaction to babies who aren't aborted. We just prefer to shrug our shoulders and pretend there's no conflict.
But at least there's the objective point in there where basically should these two little girls be alive or dead? Should they be here or not here, if you want to word it more softly? And the parents' verdict was, no, they should be here. We're happy. We're glad that they're here. And you can say that without saying, but I'll say it, God bless these pro-life legislators and all the pro-lifers in Texas who saved these twins from utter barbaric destruction. And whether these people agreed with it at the time, whether they were mad, whether the ridiculously loser grandpa had his fingers crossed that she could still get an abortion, all that's irrelevant. In the end, this was a pro-life law saving these babies, and it was a pregnancy resource center saving these babies. And that is something that is good for our movement. That is the highlight of the article. Besides the article being weird and odd, the highlight is the fact that pro-life laws save babies, and they also pregnancy resource centers save babies. But
it's a great. The article also implodes on itself a little bit too, because you've got 4,500 words. I mean, this is a super long article, 4,500 words talking about speculating all the different ways that this man and this woman's lives would have been better had they not been forced to choose life. And, the woman would have become a real estate agent. She had plans for education, and they all had like these big plans, and that's fine. And I'm not saying they would not have achieved those goals, but based on their history and just sort of everything the article says about them, there's no reason to believe that any of those things would have happened. She dropped out of high school at 15. He's chilling at the skateboard place, and his like biggest ambition is to learn a new skateboard trick. Like, there's no reason to believe that it would have been a happily ever after had they just gotten the abortion. But instead, you know what? They had the babies, and there is some happily ever after here. They're going to continue to struggle, no doubt. All of us do. But the guy who wanted to be skateboarding and playing video games, he joined the military. He's earning a salary. He's providing for his family. That would not have happened had they gotten the abortion. They struggled in their marriage, as many young couples do, but they went to counseling and they're working through their issues. They're talking about having another child. The twins are, quote, healthy and happy. They're taking swimming lessons. Fun fact, when I was a kid, I failed swimming lessons, not once, but twice. But they're taking swimming lessons. They'll be a better swimmer than I am. And they're enjoying bedtime stories. Like, there's a whole like slice of American dream and Americana that kind of like comes together in the last 500 words of the article. Again, I'm not trying to say happily ever after, like story's over and it's all good from here. There will continue to be challenges that they'll struggle with, but this is a good outcome. Like, if you don't know about a pregnancy test, you go to like a day before they take the pregnancy test and flash forward 2 years. I think their lives are in better places than anybody would have imagined had they not had those twins.
I agree. And this is for all those reasons, because, it's happened when she was like 19. This is why they are deeply, deeply going to regret doing this article, because none of this is going away. And this will be one of those articles. We pull stuff like this all the time where it's 10 years old, it's 20 years old, and it's almost more relevant now. But this will be more relevant because it's like the result of Dobbs, and they're really going to regret it when they're 35 and they have 3 kids, or they have 5 kids, or whatever they have, or they just have the twins. I mean, it's really bad. It's really going after them in this passive aggressive way. Look at these young idiots. They don't know what they're doing. And these people could be teaching parenting classes in 15 years. That happens a lot, by the way. You get the people who had a kid at 20, or she got pregnant, so they got married, which we don't really endorse, but that happens. And sometimes it's really good. Sometimes it's a mess. It just depends on the couple, like everything else. But they get married and you don't even know it. I know a lot of people, and they're like, yeah, our oldest, we conceived her, before we were married. And, we always said we maybe would get married, but and then they had like 5 other kids, and you had no idea, right? You just thought they got married and had 5 kids, but the oldest was conceived out of wedlock, as happens, obviously. And the answer is just have an abortion. And then you get these beautiful stories of these families that choose life, and they end up teaching the parenting classes because they had to start off on such rocky ground. I just think they're really going to regret doing this. And it may not be long. It may be a year from now, but certainly as they get older. I didn't know you could fail swimming lessons as a kid. How do you fail? You start sinking and they pick you up and say you just got a D or an F?
I don't know. I just know I got to the last class and they had, what is your placement for next year? And it was continuously the same level that I had been in the year before that I had just completed.
Steve, swimming lessons have become a very comical topic in my house this summer, because Mary Lisa and I realized, like, we're still going, to swimming lessons for my 6-year-old and 5-year-old daughters, who are very good swimmers. But then we looked down and we were going to put Timothy in it. He's 3, but he's so crazy. We don't know if he'll stay in there with the lifeguard. And so, anyways, we're going to wait on him. But we realized we took Bridget and Bailey to swimming lessons like 15 years ago. And we're still at swimming lessons, and we will continue to be at swimming lessons. And Steve, that's a struggle. But you know what? I'm happy all my kids are alive, and I pray that they live as long as possible as God grants them life. And I'm an old man, and I die and go before them. But the whole notion that you're talking about this, and I'm like, swimming lessons. Oh yeah, that's a pain. And just people just jump to like, hey, I wouldn't have to do that if my kid was dead. And that is what this article highlights, and that's why it's so absurd. Can you swim now?
I can tread water. I can be in water and not drown. But anything that would resemble a coordinated stroke, yeah.
I can be in water and. Well, are you afraid of the water? Which is okay. I respect people who are afraid of water.
I should be more afraid of the water given how poor I am at swimming. I'll go in it. I sometimes even enjoy it. But Laura always tells this story about on our honeymoon. We were blessed. Laura's grandma treated us with a honeymoon to Mexico. And we're like on the beach on the Mexican Riviera. And Laura sees me like way out deep in the water and realizing Steve can't swim. I might be one of those tragic news stories about the wife who loses her husband on the honeymoon. But thanks be to God, I made it back and lived to tell about it.
This is tragic. I know we really went off subject here, but I didn't know. So if we're just at a hotel and we're walking past the pool, you're not nervous at all. Like if I fall in,
No, it's not a phobia.
I would get you.
It's sheer, so let's put it this way. You have seen at the symposium me dance. Picture that same lack of coordination, coordinated movement, hand-eye coordinate, all of the things that make someone physically graceful and that you have not seen on the dance floor. Picture that, but in water.
I have an opposite thing, and then we'll wrap up in case they haven't turned it off yet. My grandparents retired on a lake. It was what you'd call like a good old boy lake. It's where like the folks lived. And there was a section that they lived on. You could swim all the way across it. It was long. It was far, but there was like a golf course. And we're like 11 and 12, me and my cousins. And we would no life jacket, just go swim across the lake. And then it's one of those where you go and you could pick up golf balls. We take like Walmart, like grocery bags. Okay. And we'd dig the golf balls out of the bottom of the lake, and then we'd swim back with the golf balls. Okay. And there's boats going around, there's jet skis, there's everything. And so it's one of those, like, I thought, oh, that was really fun. And then you become an adult and we go out to my grandparents and I'm like 25 years old or 30 years old. And I'm just like, we were idiots. Like we swam across that. Like it's just dumb. Like we were definitely going to be on a news story. So I was a good swimmer, and a dumb one. So that's my version of that. Okay, if you want to read the article, go for it. We hope we summarized it for you. We ask you to please rate, review, share this podcast. Remember, we are headed towards what we believe will be the largest 40 Days for Life campaign ever. And we want to thank once again our wonderful leaders for coming out in droves. We had a record symposium last month, and they are getting ready to go. So please pray for them this August as they go through the training and go in depth in the training to prepare to lead 40 Days for Life in a post-Roe America where the other side doesn't know what to say when, and we do. And we also know when to pray for an end to abortion, and that is all the time. So please do that as we head into the fall campaign. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Jill, who will edit this podcast and hopefully keep all of our swimming banter in at the end. And please rate, review, share this podcast, and we will see you next time. God bless you.